Phillip Thune, welcome to the Paid Search NYC podcast.
Good to be here.
Great to have you, and appreciate you coming down on what is a very warm day in Manhattan, 95 degrees outside, 35 for those in the UK, and I know you work with a lot of Brits, so
Exactly.
you probably have to do that conversion quite a lot.
Yep.
So you're the CEO of a company called Adthena. That company was founded in 2012. I think a lot of people in the paid search space are probably familiar with that name. And from my own recollection, they've been known to generally offer a few different products and services, but it's always been in the search, insight, and reporting space. And today they're very much a search, insight and reporting platform. And we're going to be talking today a lot about the different products and services that Adthena offers to help provide brands with that clarity in the search landscape, which is more important than ever given the amount of change and disruption. We're also going to talk about the study you did, an AIO overviews that was released in Search Engine Land, 10 million SERPs, huge study. Going to get into that. But before we do, I'd like to start off with a little bit about you. So I mentioned CEO of Adthena. You started there 2.5 years ago. Tell us a little bit about your career journey up to starting at Adthena.
Sure. So got my career started with an investment bank, and I ended up just somewhat randomly being in the media group. So back then worked with a lot of radio companies, some television companies, worked for something called America Online, which at the time was relatively new. And then right about 2000, I decided, you know what, the dotcom was booming. This was before the bust in like March, April of 2000. It's like, it seems like the right place to go. So I joined a paid search company. And it was a company that was doing pay-per-click search ads actually before Google. The originator of all these paid search ads was a company called GoTo, which I think started in 1998. So I was kind of there almost at the beginning of paid search. The company was called findwhat.com. To be honest, we were basically a copy. We sort of saw what GoTo was doing. We were more on the SEO side, and we said, oh, that seems like a good model. So like tremendous growth. I think when I started, we had 35 people, roughly $500,000 of revenue. Over a 4 or 5 year period, that went to over $200 million of revenue. 500 employees. It was a publicly traded company. I think when I joined, wasn't quite a NASDAQ company. And then as we got bigger, we sort of qualified to be listed on NASDAQ. I think peak market cap of $700 million.
Wow.
So yeah, it was kind of an unbelievable journey. Google, of course, did get into paid search. And over time, that kind of wiped out everybody else who was in it. Obviously, Bing is still around. GoTo became Overture, sold themselves to Yahoo. But yeah, so I've been doing this a long time. The last 25 years, kind of involved either in competing against Google, which is never a great idea, or more helping companies kind of figure Google out. And I've done it both on the SEO side and now with Adthena on the SEM side.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Not many people can claim they've been in paid search pre-Google, so that is that's impressive. I'm always very interested to understand. I feel like over time you sort of get experience to be able to understand the fundamental change within innovation. So over the past 20, 25 years, there have been lots of different innovations. We're currently going through a big period of that right now. Do you find with time it's easier to understand the fundamentals of what's changing and sort of cut through the noise? And I'm speaking obviously about AI and obviously a lot of change there. But do you find, having lived through early 2000s and worked in the industry then, that it's easier to sort of understand the fundamentals of what's changing and cut through the noise when it comes to understanding what's happening within the industry?
That's a good question. I think the answer is yes, primarily because there's so many more people watching. Right, so Google paid ads, just Google paid ads, is over a $200 billion business. You can't think of a brand that's not spending money on Google, right? So, 20 years ago, there was definitely an ecosystem, right? I can't imagine how many jobs over the years Google has created for people who don't work at Google, right? Just people obsessed with Google and trying to figure out Google. I don't know that it's easier. I think the pace of change today is faster than I've ever seen it, right? So Google on the organic side, on the paid side, if there's one thing that's been constant, it's always changed. I was at a company that sort of had a marketplace of freelance writers. We had thousands and thousands of writers, and most of what people wanted our writers to do was for SEO purposes. Like 2011, Panda, right, which was an organic change.
Yep.
Like literally overnight, that business was already growing, but it took off even more because unique content became so much more important. Google had figured out, oh, if somebody's copied this content, we're not going to show them in the organic rankings. So there's always been like change that not only impacts like what's going on the search results, but impacts all this huge ecosystem and all these companies that rely on it. But pace of change today, I don't think I would have ever said 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that it feels like something fairly material changes every week, if not, maybe it's every 2 weeks. And that's where we are. Like, we have a very active board of directors. It's a fantastic board. They want to be kept in the loop. And it's like, I got to kind of talk to them almost every week or send them a report or an email just so they kind of stay up to speed. Same with our team. So probably easier to figure it out because so many people are watching and there's so much reported about it. But the pace of change is unbelievable. Yeah,
makes sense. So bring us up to then Adthena. Why did you decide to join Adthena?
It was a perfect fit in a lot of ways. When I look back on my career, I was like, I kind of worked at 4 different companies before Adthena. And in every case, I felt like I was helping a founder grow their company, hopefully bigger than they could have without me. In some cases, I was actually a co-founder, but in no case was it my idea. So I always felt like somebody had an idea or somebody had gotten a company up and running, and could I kind of help them? I have a huge amount of respect for founders, like just saying, hey, I'm going to start a company and against the odds, try to turn it into something real. Just a huge amount of respect. So Adthena follows that mode. Ian O'Rourke kind of started the company from scratch. Started in London, actually, as you mentioned. So there's kind of legend of having an office above a kebab shop in London, and you get all, I love that, right?
Yeah.
And Ian's still a big shareholder. He's still on the board of directors. I still talk to him all the time. So that was one. Like, hey, it's a founder-led company. The founder's still going to be really involved. That was important. It was in paid search, which I've been doing for a long time. So that made a lot of sense. The size of the company kind of also fit. I've had some successes and kind of grown companies to get to be pretty big, but I always seem to go back to something that's a little bit earlier stage. I always like companies where I know everybody's name, and that starts to become difficult when you have a few hundred people.
Yeah.
Adthena has a little bit over 100. So it really fit kind of my background and what I like to do pretty well.
Nice. Let's talk about search then. So mentioned there's a lot of change there. How would you summarize the major changes that have happened within search over the last 18 months?
Far and away, it's AI, right? Mm-hmm. So for the first time in 20-ish years, I think Google has real competition in terms of finding information on the web. Like I said, we've had Bing, we've had DuckDuckGo, we've had others, but Google has always had worldwide, north of 90% market share. And when we talk about the pace of change being really quick, I think share of search queries is definitely dropping. I think search queries overall, including search queries that Google handles, is rising rapidly because with AI, there's a lot more things you can ask. So I think people are asking a lot more stuff. So AI by far, from kind of what's happening with consumer or people's activities. And then the other thing, and this has been pretty steady, but again, Google keeps trying to accelerate it, is how much AI influences the advertiser side, right? Google, it's a question, right? Does Google someday want every advertiser to sort of say, oh, you know what? Google's AI is going to figure out what I should bid on and what my ad copy should be, and all these things, as long as I know what my ROAS is or my cost per lead. Should I just hand my budget over to Google? we're of the opinion that that's maybe not the best idea, at least for the foreseeable future. But yeah, so AI in terms of what the searcher's looking for, and then AI in terms of the advertiser having a lot more tools and ways to try to figure out to optimize their Google campaigns.
Yep. And you mentioned there that Google's share has decreased, but the volume has probably increased because a lot of how people are searching in terms of AI, LLMs, it's incremental to their existing search behavior. I think that's a belief I'm seeing more and more. I think at early stages, it was very much, it's going to replace traditional search, Google's going to disappear. I think we're now starting to appreciate it as incremental. I don't know if I've seen any data to support that yet. Do you have any data, or have you seen any data to support kind of how much the search ecosystem has grown?
I guess kind of because I'm in it every day, it's maybe just a gut feel from just seeing that ChatGPT has 800 million users and people, how many people are asking questions to that. Google is a public company, so every 3 months they kind of have to talk about things. So I think after first quarter 2025, they said they had 1.5 billion people looking at AI overviews. Now they reported, I think, second quarter last week. Now it's 2 billion. So kind of 500 million in 3 months. So from numbers, like, I don't know that there's a definitive, this is exactly how many queries a day are happening across all the various places you can search. But yeah, it seems undeniable that it's rapidly growing. And I think Google, that's not a number that Google talks about, but we can kind of see a lot of stuff with our clients. We have close to 400 of the biggest brands out there, huge Google spenders. So just having a sense, and we're talking to them all the time, and have a sense of kind of what they're seeing and what they're doing. And while everybody wants to find out more about AI, both in Google, outside of Google, they continue to spend more and more money, right? So Google just announced that number of clicks, paid clicks, right? So it doesn't necessarily tell you how many organic searches are happening, but paid clicks grew 4% in Q2 versus Q2 of 2024. Revenue grew over 10%, which Google just seems to churn out, more paid advertising every quarter. So yeah, I don't have a definitive number, but clearly it's growing, and I think it's growing pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would agree. That probably leads quite nicely on to the study you did that was on Search Engine Land. So that was 10 million SERPs analyzed, I think 450,000 keywords, 5 different categories.
Right.
And that study essentially showed the prevalence or the presence of AI overviews based on search term length, I believe. Tell us a bit more about why you did that study.
Single biggest question we're getting, which is interesting because at the moment there are not a whole lot of ads on AI overviews, and even fewer on AI mode. But our brands, our clients are literally asking us every day, like, my CEO, my chief marketing officer, my VP of marketing, they're asking me what's going on. What do we have to be worried about? Do we need to change things? And so the single biggest change, I think, to what we call a search landscape is these AIOs, because they're not that big. They're like, probably if you just do pixels, right? If you do a search, a locally minded search, you'll get a map pack. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty big chunk of real estate. But then AI overviews, right? Usually you can sort of click and get the AI overview, the rest of the AI overview. But if you do click on that, that takes up pretty much everything above the fold. So it's pretty rare that you have searches that result in a kind of unit within the Google search result page that takes that much space up. And so if you're an advertiser, again, I think Google is going to constantly be testing. I'm sure there'll be ads above the AI overviews, maybe to the side of them, below them. At the moment, for the most part, it's below. So if it's below, or even if there are no ads in the AI overviews, but there's text ads below, the further down you are on the page, right, you get less clicks, right? Your click-through rate goes down. So what we did was actually look at everything that's on a search page, not just the AI overviews. But as soon as we launched that new report inside our tool, inside our app, that was the AI overview was the thing that everybody wanted to know about. And so it's now, I think, the 5th most visited page, which we've been around for a long time, right? To launch something new and have it be the 5th most visited page means that people really care about it.
Yeah, it's a great study. We'll bring it up on the screen afterwards. We'll edit that in. And the particular infographic I'm thinking about is the one where you have got that distribution by search term and the percentage of false, true AI overviews present, and how that's different across those 5 categories. And I think there were retail, finance, automotive, healthcare, travel, I think. And it was just very interesting to see the difference across those categories. I think travel, pretty much next to no real change there. Whereas if you look at, say, healthcare, I think even a single term, search term, it was like 40+% all the way up to 90% on 10+, which is crazy. I guess, how did you interpret the results across those categories, given the sort of wide differences in terms of like percentages?
Yeah. So, and maybe just to explain that, so we kind of looked at how many different words are in a search term, right? So is it a 1-word search term all the way up to, are there 10 different words in that search term? And what's consistent across all 5 categories is the more words, the more often you see an AI overview. But yeah, what's more surprising maybe is, like you said, travel. As you start to get more and more words in a travel query, I think you do start to get more AI overviews, but you never get nearly as many as if it's a long healthcare query in terms of number of search terms. So yeah, I think the differences can be pretty stark, and not that many people traditionally put 10 different words into a search term. I think that's another thing that's changing rapidly is people realize, oh, I can go to Google or I can go to ChatGPT or Perplexity. I can do a 30-word prompt, right, and get a reasonable answer. So I think, and Google has said that. They've said like the length of the queries or the search terms that they see is steadily getting longer. So that was why it was important for us to kind of look at those. Typically, they'd be longer tail search terms, right? Usually, a 10-word search term doesn't have as many queries as a 1 or 2. But we were surprised. And what's also interesting is like retail, I think, had the biggest difference between a really short query and a really long query. So if it was really short, 1 or 2 words, running shoes, you're not going to see an AI overview all that often. But if you start to get 8 words, 9 words, 10 words, now you're seeing it maybe 70, 80% of the time. So, I think makes common sense to me that the longer it is, the more often you're going to see an AI overview. But what wasn't necessarily common sense was that different industries would have such differences between how often they show up.
Do you think that's a reflection of the level of commercial intent reflected in that?
I mean, all 5 of those categories have a fair amount of commercial intent, but certainly healthcare, right? There's a lot of healthcare queries that are not like, I want to buy something. It's like, what's wrong with me or what's wrong with somebody I know? I think the same with finance. Finance was kind of second, right? You get a lot of queries about, what should I be doing or what should I be thinking about as opposed to, oh, I need to, find a new credit card or find a new bank. So retail and travel were the ones that, when it wasn't that many words, didn't have a whole lot of AI overviews. And I think that makes sense, right? I think Google is saying, oh, okay, these shorter queries, somebody's just kind of looking to see what I want to buy something. So let's show them, shopping results or things that you might want to buy or hotel ads if it's travel. But if it starts to get to be a really long query, okay, maybe they're not looking for something to buy. Maybe they're looking more information and trying to understand. They're what's top of the funnel, right? They're not close to making a buying decision. They're just sort of investigating and trying to figure out, where they should be looking or what they should be thinking about. So I think from that perspective, it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I'm trying to combine that with how, as a paid search practitioner, if we, over the years, if we looked at like search and reports and we've seen like single term or two search term keywords, often the conversion rates on those are lower and the CPCs are lower because it's harder to understand the exact intent behind it.
Right.
And then as the term gets slightly longer, it can get more expensive because it's clear what someone's looking for, and so the conversion rate's higher. And I'm trying to match that with the data on AI overviews. I guess there's a difference between the level of commercial intent and also and the ability to understand what somebody's actually looking for. Like those are two different things. So you wouldn't necessarily see like an S curve in the AI overviews where it's like, there's actually less AI overviews as you get into like a certain number of terms, and then it goes back up again.
Right. We saw, I think there might have been a little bit of a waggle between one term and two terms, and then 1 word, 2 words, and 3 words. But yeah, once you got past a 2-word search term or 2-word query, didn't matter what category, the more words, the more AI overviews showed up.
Yep. And I think in that study as well, you split out brand and non-brand. And from memory, again, we'll get the graphic up, but brand was pretty much next to nothing apart from one category, which is
healthcare.
Was it healthcare again? Yeah. And then it was pretty much all skewed towards non-brand. Was that expected? Was that a surprise?
I think it was a surprise that it was like 0. In finance and travel and retail, it was 0, right? So if you do a brand search, you're not going to get an AI overview.
Yep.
So that's interesting and almost surprising because I said a few minutes ago, Google is constantly testing things. So I'm a little surprised that they're not at least testing, what happens when we show an AI overview if it's a brand query. So that was surprising. But yeah, I again, we're sort of guessing here, but you would assume that Google's saying, hey, if somebody knows the brand that they want to get to, let's just show them either some products that brand sells, or just show them kind of the text ad or the organic result that gets them to the website.
Yeah.
There's, and again, this number I'd love to know, but there's a really significant percentage of queries that are just navigational, like not even navigational, like map kind of thing, but like, where do I go on the web?
Yeah.
And Google makes a tremendous amount of money from, somebody promotes their brand on a blog or TV or billboard, and then people go to Google and type in the brand name and then click on an ad a lot of times to get to that person's website. And Google kind of gets credit for that when, I don't know, right? It's the brand that kind of built up their brand and got you to type their brand name into Google. So does Google deserve credit for that? But so I think Google trying to get people to that brand website or to that brand's products as quickly as they can. And again, AIOs take up such a big chunk of the real estate, so we're not going to distract you because that's probably not what you want. It'll be interesting to see over time if that change, and I would be surprised if we don't at least see some percentage with Google kind of testing out what happens when they show an AI overview, what happens when they don't.
Yeah, I think a lot of the narrative I've read around why this might be a quote unquote good thing for brands is that a lot of these terms, and if you believe that like there's lower commercial intent for the ones where there's high AI overviews, is that Google's almost clarifying or getting a better understanding of what that user's looking for, so that when they eventually do end up on a website, the conversion rates are higher. Now for SEO, that hopefully means that you get less clicks, but the clicks you do get convert better. I think we're still waiting to see sort of more data on that. But from a paid perspective, the reason why there's this incentive for them to do that is because then they could probably charge higher CPCs because then that's a more qualified user. Is that a narrative you agree with, or do you think those are the things at play?
I mean, Google themselves, although they don't give us any data to back it up, say that if there's an ad in an AI overview, it leads to better conversions because it's coming, it's the bottom of a whole description of, sort of some information or some recommendations. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to go buy that. I think Google is going to try to kind of keep up with everybody else. So think about the experience when you go to ChatGPT and do a search with commercial intent, or you start to investigate which running shoes you should be buying. So yeah, I mean, Google's got this $200 billion business that they need to protect, and I'm sure they're going to do everything they possibly can. And again, what's been consistent from Google almost pretty much from day one that I was involved is they just test things all the time, and they have so much volume that you could test. I'm sure Google could test something for 30 minutes and have a super statistically relevant kind of sample of, oh, is this a good thing or a bad thing? So, so I don't know. I hesitate to say, oh, it's, if it's commercial intent, then you're not going to see AI overviews or eventually AI mode showing up in the Google search results. I think if Google feels like, well, geez, we're losing people to ChatGPT and others, and they're starting to do more commercial queries, some outside of Google, then we need to change and we need to give them what they seem to be happy with outside of us. So, I think it's again, things change, all the time. Yeah. The pace of change is quick. I'm sure Google's running a million different experiments, and I'm sure they'll ultimately do. I think I give them credit. I think they ultimately do what's in the best interest of the searcher, because over the long term, that's in the best interest of them. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say, oh, they're only going to show ads and not show AI overviews because that means they're going to make more money. I think they realize, especially in this time we're in, that they need to give the person searching what they want. Yeah. And if that's an AI overview for a commercial query, then they're going to start to do that more.
Yeah. And I think it's harder than ever to disagree with that, given the fact that there's just more competition. There's better search experiences in some cases. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing in that report, I think, were some call-outs on sort of CPC, CTR, quality score. Can you just talk a little bit about what you found there in the study?
Yeah, so number one question we got was around the AI overviews, but the number one detailed question around that is, what is it doing to my click-through rate? And like I said, if there's an AI overview above your text ads, your click-through rates are, for every 1,000 impressions or 100 impressions, your click-through rate's going down. The further down you are on the page, the less clicks you're going to get. So that's number one, and I think there's no doubt. And one piece of advice we have is right, once you have this information, what do you do with it? Well, be alert to the things that don't have AI overviews, right? Because you're not going to see your click-through rate going to go down. Maybe you want to put more money into bidding on those terms, assuming conversion rates. Assuming conversion rates are good. But yeah, so click-through rate was number one question. In terms of CPCs, I think we've got some theories. We don't. Study's kind of still new. We're still sort of helping our clients figure out what to do about it. I think a theory is that CPCs could rise because if you're getting less clicks, every click becomes more important. So you want to make sure you're going to be at the top. Excuse me.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is probably like an impossible question to answer, and it's probably the reason why you should have these reporting tools. But do you feel like the state we are in within search is likely to have seen the most change that it's going to, and that we've reached kind of a new equilibrium and it's more tweaking, or is it just too difficult to really call that? And instead, that's the importance of these tools, whether things are changing or not, like having the insight, be able to react and see what's happening. But yeah, how would you think about that?
No, for as rapid as the change feels right now, I think it's only gonna increase.
Okay.
No, we're nowhere close to sort of an end state, if there ever is one. But no, like I said, I think Google's watching what its users do, but it's also watching, what's happening on ChatGPT and the others. Because it's got to defend this huge business it's got, and so like I said, I think they're doing lots of tests all the time. I think those tests increase as they see what others are doing, what seems to be working, who's growing, who's not growing as much. A year from now, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I've got some theories, but I guarantee it will be very different than it is today. And I think that's, AI overviews, I think first rolled out maybe a year and a half ago. AI mode, that's probably the bigger change. I think it was maybe a month ago. Again, everything is so recent. A month and a half ago, CEO of Google or Alphabet was saying, they're kind of like, well, is AI mode the future of Google search? And he kind of said, Yeah, I think it's going to depend on what kind of query it is, right? So if it's a brand query, maybe not. But an AI mode is very different from AI overviews, right? You do the same query or same search term. It's interesting. You get a different answer. They're generating their answers differently. So yeah, I guarantee, a little dangerous, but I guarantee within a year from now, you will see AI. You'll see more AI mode. It'll show up more often. Will it actually just sort of be on the search page if that's the best result for what the person asked? I think the answer is going to be yes, because otherwise Google's going to see people going to ChatGPT if that's a preferred kind of way to get their information back.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think even on the paid side, we might have discussed it before, but the fact that Perplexity, ChatGPT, these LLMs don't necessarily have a sort of fully open paid platform like Google Ads yet, and it's incredibly likely they will. And that's going to be a change that practitioners in the paid search world need to adapt to and figure out how to optimize that platform and how that sort of fits in with the media mix. So I think even there's more change to come. Yeah,
I saw Sam Altman again, not that recently. A few weeks, not that long ago. A few weeks ago, he was still struggling with ads, showing ads in ChatGPT. But he said, well, but maybe we do something like we get an affiliate commission if we link out. And then, again, literally a few days ago, last week, they had announced this deal with Shopify, but they've said, hey, if somebody asks us a question and it has something to do with e-commerce and we point to an e-commerce site, instead of pointing them away from ChatGPT to the e-commerce site, we'll keep them inside of ChatGPT and it'll be a Shopify experience and they'll be able to buy the thing without ever leaving ChatGPT. And OpenAI will get a commission for that. So I wouldn't call that advertising exactly. It's certainly a different form of revenue than subscriptions or charging for their API calls. But yeah, they're burning through so much money and they're growing so quickly. They're going to have to come up with other revenue streams. And I do think ad revenue is going to be part of that. It was interesting when I heard Sam Altman saying this. I go back literally 25 years, and Sergey and Larry at Google were sort of, we don't want ads to mess up our searches. It was part of the reason they were a little bit behind in terms of showing ads and then showing pay-per-click ads. They I think by 2000 they were showing ads, but it was on a CPM basis. And then they kind of realized like CPC makes way more sense and obviously became a huge business. So yeah, I think it's going to be too early to tell in terms of what form it takes. Perplexity does show sponsored follow-up prompts. They don't do it if you're paying, so only if you're kind of using the free version of Perplexity. So you might do a search or ask a question about getting a job, and then after you get the answer, there's usually 3, 4, 5 suggested follow-up prompts. One of them could be sponsored by Indeed. So I don't no reporting, at least that I've seen, on how well that's doing, or how often they're showing a sponsored prompt, or how often somebody's clicking to get the answer to that sponsored prompt. But yeah, I think it's interesting. There's going to be different things. I'm sure people will test lots of things, but hard to believe that these AI search companies aren't going to need additional forms of revenue. And again, this kind of goes back to, I was listening to another podcast about the early days of Google, and they mentioned this company GoTo, and in 1998, the web was still kind of a utopian place, and you shouldn't be trying to make money from it. And so when GoTo said, our search results are just going to be the ads, and we're going to rank them by who pays us the most. Everybody's like, you can't corrupt the internet. And they're like, well, whoever pays the most probably has actually what you want, because if they don't, they're paying us for nothing. So it was a brilliant kind of thing to think about back then. And then Google's obviously run with it pretty well. But yeah, it's, I think people are open. If there's one form of advertising that consistently people don't mind, right, it's search ads, because I'm looking for something and hear people who have something that, are selling what I'm looking for. So yeah, I think OpenAI and ChatGPT and the others will find a way to kind of present ads, and maybe they won't do it as often, right? Almost any commercial search on Google, you're going to get an ad. Maybe they do it when it's, sort of you're getting closer to making a purchase decision and you kind of want to see deals or who's got the cheapest hotel room or I don't know, something like that. But yeah, I feel really strongly that change is only going to accelerate. I feel really strongly that all the different LLM companies will have ads.
And it feels like history continues to repeat itself to a certain extent. I do want to get into the LLM sort of insight and reporting side of Adthena, because I know that's something that's either about to come or just come out. But before I get off the study, the last question I want to ask on that study is, you talked about some of the actionable things advertisers can do. So when advertisers come to you and they read this study, are they the main things you talk about from like an action point of view, or are there other things you recommend? And then does that also allay their fears totally, or is it just probably not, but yeah.
This is going to be super self-serving, but I think the most important thing is to know what's happening.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. So this study comes from this new report that we have in our app that we call the search landscape page, and it's been in the app I think for a couple months. The article you mentioned, Search Engine Land, and then we did a blog post, pretty much copy of the article, I think on July 1st. So it was kind of, we had the search landscape page in our app for a few months, did all the studies, and then kind of reported on it. So I think number one, and it was funny, one of our bigger advertisers, they said, hey, my boss is asking me what's going on with the AIOs, what's happening to our campaigns, right? And like, I think it was maybe a few days after we had launched this new search landscape report, and she was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, right. And then, like I said, very quickly, right, it's become our 5th most popular page, I think, because we're getting all these questions and we're able to say like, hey, we can kind of help you figure out at least how often are they showing up. So you've gotten a sneak preview to sort of the next iteration, which is not only how often are AIOs showing up, but what are the LLMs, including Google, linking out to. And so that's really interesting. And I'm sure we'll write a new study about that. And maybe you'll have me back. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of the advice, going back to the advice. So one is just understand what's going on. One of the main things that Adthena does is we help our clients understand what their competition is doing, right? Google gives you a fair amount of information about your own campaign. Sometimes the more AI there is, sometimes people actually use us like PMax and they don't quite totally understand what Google's doing. So we help there. But yeah, they give you a decent amount of information about your own campaigns, and they have auction insights. So they give you some limited information about your competition. But what we do is like literally give you your competition's playbook, right? We can kind of see all the search terms they're bidding on. We have a sense of how much they're spending, when they kind of go deep, when they back away, when that might give you some openings. So I think with AIOs, I'd say that it's the same thing, right? You want to know how often the search terms you care about and the search terms you're advertising on, you're seeing an AIO, but you also want to see, okay, what is my biggest competitor or my biggest 3 or 5 competitors doing? And are they doing something different than I am? And, with Adthena, we can then kind of help and see, is that changing kind of your share of clicks or your share of spend when it comes to paid search? So I think that's, again, self-serving, but that's number one, is make sure you're armed with good information so you kind of understand what people are doing and start to get ideas for what you should do. But yeah, I think definitely maybe focus, and again, it's going to depend on each client's a little different, but focus on things where it's not changing, right? So you can be comfortable that those search terms are still working the way you expect them to. And again, maybe you want to put more money towards them. I think there's a lot to think about between brand and generic. Like I said, that's a major, not surprising, but it's a major finding that with the exception of healthcare, you just really don't see AIOs showing up when it's a brand query, even if it's a multiple word query. So yeah, do you shift more of your budget to brand? And again, it's been a lot of fun having these, like most of our clients, if not all of our clients, are brand names you would have heard about. Sometimes we're allowed to talk about them, sometimes we're not. But it's really fun to see these companies that spend $5 million, $10 million, $100 million a year on paid search, kind of what they care about, how I think a lot of times, they sort of take some advice from us, but sometimes it's kind of like, oh, we're gonna go all paid, all brand, or we're gonna do some major tests on brand, or you know what, we're gonna back away. We're gonna let organic kind of pick up those clicks. So yeah, it's kind of been fun to watch. And again, I think we can kind of help our clients make some of those decisions. But yeah, like I said, a little bit self-serving, but I do think really important.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. It can feel pretty overwhelming, given the pace of change. That if you don't have access to that kind of data, it can be really difficult to make decisions. And you're usually making decisions that involve a lot of resource. So it's really important you have that data. We talked a little bit there about what's coming next, that kind of AI, LLM. And if we can, we'll bring it up. But there is an infographic I think I saw where it showed the kind of rate of linking out for different LLMs. And I think there's a really stark difference between like Perplexity and ChatGPT. If you can, any kind of thoughts or insights there and kind of what that means for brands?
Well, I guess you'll maybe see a screenshot of it, but yeah, Perplexity almost always links out. ChatGPT definitely links out, and sometimes there can be a lot of different links. We've seen kind of 20 different links on one answer to a prompt, but it can be much less frequent, and again, does depend on what vertical or category your search is about. So in terms of what do you do about it, I think the first thing, part of the reason we did ChatGPT and Perplexity is because, as I mentioned, Perplexity does have kind of a sponsored prompt. So we're not there yet, but we'll kind of be measuring that. And then ChatGPT we did because it's just the biggest. Yeah. So, but it's so much big, and Perplexity is growing really quickly, but ChatGPT is so much bigger than Perplexity. I think I'd focus on those results, right? That's where way more consumers are kind of finding information than frankly, not just Perplexity, than any of the other ones. Yeah, their growth is just spectacular. So understanding, is your category one where they tend to do a lot of link outs or not? If they do, sort of understanding who's getting those links. And again, there's a lot of other tools out there. It's become like I think I saw an infographic about, 10 or 12 pure startups that have received VC funding, and their main reason for being is helping people understand kind of AI search visibility. Like, are you showing up or are you not? So we're offering that. That's kind of part of what we do for our clients. And our clients tend to care more about the paid side than the organic side. They usually, at least the people we deal with, are usually from the paid side. And these brands are so big that those are oftentimes separate divisions and don't necessarily talk to each other that much. Sometimes they even have a different SEO agency than a SEM agency. So they really don't talk to each other. But yeah, I think what we're doing is trying to provide context for paid practitioners. There's all these other companies that are sort of cropping up, I think are more for SEO folks who are now like, okay, I spent all these years trying to get ranked highly in organic for Google. Now I got to figure out what the heck to do with ChatGPT and the rest. So yeah, I think I think the study is interesting, or the data we have is interesting, but I'd also be willing to bet that it's going to change. So at the moment, ChatGPT links out way less frequently than Perplexity, which almost always does. But again, it depends on what category you're in. And again, I think that's useful information, especially if you're more on the SEO or organic side. Yeah, makes sense. With the time we have left, I have a couple of maybe curveball-esque questions. The first one is, I think you mentioned at the start, you were previously at Textbroker. And I think I've seen your online quote yourself as being in the paid search SEO space for quite a while. So you kind of, both worlds. It feels like if you're working in the paid search side and you're running campaigns, you're moving away from having keywords in the platform to the system handling that through algorithmic decision-making based on inputs. One of those inputs is the landing page. So how
do you think that's going to impact how we optimize paid search? And I guess where I'm going with that is, do you think you'll see tools, and maybe Adthena is going to build this, I don't know, where I, as a practitioner in paid search, could understand the changes that has, changes on a landing page from a content perspective has on a paid campaign, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's AI Max, right, which is rolling out, which supposedly you don't have to worry about that. I mean, you still have to worry about the content on your page, but AI Max will figure out what the right landing page is, which, again, I think, and this is a probably not surprising insight, but the more you spend on Google, the more control you want to have, right? That's not to say that some giant-sized brands, many huge brands are using PMax, especially when it's on retail, right? So I think when PMax was first rolled out, and we talk to people at Google all the time too, Google themselves didn't think big brands would use PMax, but as they've developed it and made it better and better, most big brands do at least spend some of their money or some of their campaigns or PMax campaigns. AI Max is like, hey, we'll create the copy. We'll figure out what page on your website is the most appropriate. We'll, try to make that return on investment great and get them to the right page, which hopefully makes a better user experience. I think, again, if you're a bigger spender, bigger brands, it's going to make you uncomfortable, at least for some period of time. So, and then you get, finance clients and pharma clients, healthcare clients. They can't let Google, right? There's so many regulations. They have, 10 lawyers kind of look over everything, maybe not 10 lawyers, but they have lawyers look over ad copy. So they just can't give that control over to Google. So there's definitely going to be some segments where Google just can't, or any of the other folks can't just automate everything. But yeah, no, I think why is the landing page important? One, it impacts your conversion rate, also impacts your quality score, right? Which either makes your cost per click higher or lower than it might otherwise be. So no, that it strikes me that continues to be really important, especially if you want to maintain that control. And yeah, it's a good question. We don't do a whole lot today to kind of help in terms of, what should you do with your landing page other than giving you kind of a sense of whether it's working or not. But yeah, maybe an area for us to expand into.
Nice. The next question is, how would you describe the agentic web? And part two of that would be, how does that look today? And what do you think maybe not the end form, but how it will look in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I think we go back and forth on that. And because things keep changing and new things keep happening, right? I think our thinking evolves pretty quickly. So if you ask me what's going to happen 5 years from now, and you ask me that question 3 months from now, I might have a somewhat different answer, which is a little strange. But yeah, as it sits today, I think you're still going to have the web. I worry a bit about kind of publishing sites or purely informational sites, right? Those are the ones that have seen their SEO traffic just get hammered. If you sell something, or you offer service, you offer a product, you need a way to get all the information about your product and your service to Google and to now these other AI search engines. So a website continues to probably be the best way, but yeah, do people 5 years from now rely on agents to essentially search for them? You say, hey, I think I just saw somebody talk about, actually did it, right? They're like, oh, I'm having a dinner party on Sunday night. I want, go tell the agent, go to the supermarket website, my credit card number, my login, and you just order what I need for this recipe, the recipe ingredients. So I don't even have to tell you like how much of everything I need. It's 10 people. I want to make these few dishes. You just go to their website, order everything, make sure they deliver it at noon on Sunday. So I think that use case already wasn't perfect, but that use case is almost here. But yeah, so how do the agents figure out all the information I need so that they go and do what I've asked them to do or what I want to have happen? But I also think when it comes to spending money, I find it really hard to believe that discovery is not part of that, right? So I might say, hey, I'm going to Greece, or I'm going to Athens. I've got a family of 5. Give me all the choices of where I might stay, and I might get some really good information. But then, am I just going to have the agent go do that, or do I kind of want to look up those hotels and see what the prices are? Are they running a special? Maybe if I go a week later, I'm going to get a better. So I think agents, no doubt, agents will become bigger and bigger. They will do more and more of what we finding out things for us or actually doing things for us. But I hesitate to think that, again, anytime soon, we just give over everything to the agents and we just assume they're going to get it all right, or we're not going to want to have our own input or sort of figure a little bit of that out for ourselves. So yeah, I can guarantee it's going to be a lot of change, but like I said, 3 months from now, I might have a somewhat different view, but that feels about right, at least from everything I've seen so far.
Yep. We'll get you on in 3 months' time and ask you again.
Sounds good.
Awesome. This has been really fun, Philip. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.